Wow. What's up? Just is the audio is working? Why am I muted? Is the audio? Why do I sound so distant? Anyways, it's fine. It's fine. It seems to be working. Somewhat, it's working enough. So yeah. Anyways, give me 5 minutes. Thank you. Ah, I closed. I closed the thing. What's the thing itself in which you see and I see and we see. What's the timer? That I closed the timer. Script. Thank you. Advance slash timer dot lua. Let me start. There we go. Okay, 5 minutes. Give me 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Also, wow, so kino. Thank you. But yeah, I don't know. 5 minutes, less than five actually, because I have already spent like 30 seconds sitting here. But yeah, there we go. Wait, let me. Fuck. Why is it so hard sometimes to control the most basic technology? Man, anyways, there we go. There we are. Okay, now for real. 5 minutes less. 4 minutes only. Anyways, I have stuff to. Let me go. Sorry. I don't. I. Why do I have to do that? What's my fucking problem, anyways? Here we are. That's the point. Good morning. Here we are. It's another day. Ah, am I? I don't think I'm missing anything. Not that I actually know so far. So yeah, here we are. Wait. The volume is fine. Yeah, the volume is fine. It's as always. It's just me who forgets that I should hold the microphone in a very particular position to make sure that it works and whatnot. So yeah. Anyways, uh, oh wait, I didn't change the image. I cannot believe it. I failed. Here we are. Good evening. There it is. It's working. Yeah. Okay. But I still have to change that tiny PNC at the not so left bottom left corner. But yeah, have to change that. Ah, what a crazy thing to get to be here and another day. I guess that's more than enough. This works perfectly. Actually, this is this is golden even. This is no wait. Let me resize it. There we go. Not so big actually. Anyways, good morning. It has been quite a long day, quite a long time, quite a long day, quite a long time since the last occasion that we were here. So yeah, uh, finally we are back. After how long? I don't know, 24 hours or less. But yeah, here we get to be, and that's for me. That's enough, I guess. I don't know. Many, as always, I guess, a rapid passage through everything else. What has been happening lately? Nothing actually. I think so. So yeah, it's fine. Um, I don't know, man. I have like way too many things in that sense of, oh wow, yeah, what has been happening lately? I think, as always, there is too many things going on all at once. None of them actually have that much weight in themselves, so it's um, but yeah, I guess stuff is always going on. It's just that we don't decide, or we actually, yeah, more correctly to say, we decide to not focus on any of them. That's why it seems like nothing is actually going on. Or at least we create our own values to determine what might be actually important, I guess, I don't know, and stuff of that sort and whatnot. So yeah, anyways, here we are. For me, that's more than enough, I guess. Um, yeah, so what do we even have for today? That's a very good question, a very valid question, I guess. What is in store for us lately? What is in store for us as of today? I have been thinking a lot, and I think yeah, it's somewhat as always complicated to even choose anything, and I believe that one of the best things to do is probably to go back to those roots of at least I was minimally capable of creating that book that I don't know at this point in time it is something so long that happened so long ago. The basic explanation, I guess, is there was this book that contains many bullet point type of ideas, or yeah, a very big list of things in that sense of, oh yeah, just a sentence that might lead to everything else. Very much the same as what happens with what we have when we utilize it in, oh yeah, we have just that title or this title and whatnot. So yeah, I guess that's going to come back into become once again something handy. But I don't know. It's something weird. I haven't tried to think out that quite a lot, and I think I have settled down on this opinion of actually something very funny that happens is it's not that we don't actually have any idea about which direction to go or which things is that matter for us, to us, and such. It's rather along the lines of, yeah, we ourselves don't truly realize how capable we are of accomplishing things, of being capable of doing things and whatnot. So we find ourselves then in this place, sort of wondering what could work instead of actually having sat down and tried to find anything particularly good. But I don't know, I think it's, I guess, part of the nature of anybody who procrastinates or something along those lines. It's, let me, I try to explain it like this and then we move on. It's, I guess it's something along the lines of, yeah, sadly, because we are very accustomed to literally not talking about anything that seriously, once it becomes a necessity to actually find anything that matters, we believe that by simply, by, yeah, at the first instant at which we have the idea, we become aware of the necessity of finding anything. That in itself is more than enough time spent trying to actually figure out what matters. It's like, it's something that's, it's so strange for the average person that, yeah, actually it feels like, oh wow, I have done so much work trying to figure out, for example, what I'm trying to say here. The example that I'm going for is, yeah, deciding whatever I want to be talking about. The good thing is, or the normal thing is, wow, I should actually sit down and think about that. And just with that idea in itself, one can feel satisfied and one can feel as if they have accomplished much, when in reality it's the most basic statement, the most basic, or it's just the entrance towards the whole idea and towards the whole concept and towards the whole development of the things in general and whatnot. So yeah, it's fine. The point being that, yeah, we are fine. I don't know. I just wanted to get started out of the way, I guess. But yeah. Um, anyways, the point is, why are we even here for today? Three different ideas: maturity, experience, intensity. Those three things are what congregates us to try and talk out them, I guess. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's always something funny to see that, yeah, it takes quite a lot of time to actually figure out anything along those lines. In many ways, it's, I guess the common theme is all of these things are things that by themselves require quite a lot of time to properly grasp. Not as if no idea required patience to be properly absorbed, but rather, I guess, along the easiest mode of referring to them will be the years of time consuming tasks, stuff, all of these three things, we could classify them as easily, oh yeah, all of these things might be, I don't know, from a 1 to 10 scale, 1 being almost instantaneous, 10 being almost an entire life. Maybe these three sit between a 6 and a 7, something along those lines. And why? I don't actually know. I don't. I have an explanation. I don't actually have a fully objective answer. I can only explain it through what I understand in terms of, yeah, what seems to be at work in this case is, funnily enough, that we have many things that allow us to say and to forget that we don't actually have that much of an impediment when trying to deal with things, you know? So we associate all of these concepts with the necessity of spending long enough hours, days, months of our life, years, decades, trying to understand them and to grasp them in order to be capable of then properly defining them. Not because they actually require, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years to be fully defined as something, but rather because that's the modus operandi of everyone. So anything that has to do with once again these three topics in general is associated with oh yeah, we just require to observe it, or sorry, to observe for a long enough period of time until we can finally come to conclusions and understand, explain, extrapolate, and be capable of utilizing it within the rest of our knowledge, or be capable of integrating it with everything else that we know. And I don't know, I don't think it's something that needs to work like that, but I guess it's going to be hard to talk about the three, yeah, all, all of them at the same time. So let me focus. Let me actually just go for one. Uh, as always, the structure is first thing, first maturity. It's the most basic thing. I don't know. Once again, we have already a sort of already given introduction. That's already something that we can move forward from and try to particularly talk about that, taking into consideration also what has been said. Yeah, I don't know, I have been realizing quite a lot. From a personal perspective, I think it's quite complex to be capable of referring to this idea of maturity in any proper way. Mostly because there is something very funny that happens once we try to observe it in itself, the concept, so to speak. We don't have the capacity to refer to maturity as something innate to anything, or something that can be called mature without being that classification correlated to the rest of the similar things, similar animals, similar living beings, I guess, who are not mature. It's just a comparative mode of talking about the stuff. In many cases, we don't say, oh yeah, somebody mature is somebody who just is. We always have to carry this definition of, okay, maturity is somebody who is this thing in comparison to this other thing. Somebody mature is somebody who is capable of dealing with certain type of situations compared to the person who unavoidably is immature and doesn't have the capacity to deal with them, you know? And I don't know, I don't have the capacity to truly say maturity is something that we can allude so much in terms of di- direct observation of anything in itself, of a thing, this concept of a thing in the void. Nothing gets to be mature in the void of its own existence. We're always talking about the maturity of stuff in comparison to the rest. But even so, I guess it's just a necessary classification, or clarification to make, sorry, because somehow it becomes quite an easy misunderstanding to have that, yeah, we end up believing that somehow maturity is a quality that needs to be through an ultimately personal method gained. It is in itself something that only the general world gets to define, so to speak. I do not get to call myself more or less mature because of how I conceive myself. I can only assume that I might be somewhat more or less mature in certain areas of my life, basing myself on different models that I might create around the world. about different situations. But the reality is, this quality, if we are trying to talk about maturity in any sense, in which it is a proper definition, is only found once that the world has bestowed it upon something else, so to speak. Nothing gets to be, as I said, things in their process of existence, I guess, don't have the possibility of gaining the tag of maturity just because they kept on existing. It is only through the comparison that things become mature. But the point is, why are we even trying to talk about this? It's not exactly that. It's more along the lines of, okay, with that being said, something very funny that happens is unavoidably we do still have some methods of measuring and at least with a more objective method comparing things so that we can try to make it look like maturity is a more objective thing which every single one of us can attain at certain points. Like, for example, the bodily maturity doesn't happen until we are around 25 years old, and that is the first type of maturity. That's not even the real final type of maturity. The body keeps on madurating and so to speak, growing or even decaying, I guess, if you wanted to say it like that, throughout the whole of our existence, even in our final days, we keep on dying, or keep on growing, so to speak. Decaying, I guess, I don't know. It's maturity is just a threshold that we utilize. In this case, trying to refer more particularly to humans, to those different characteristics that end up denoting that we have attained certain qualities, like, for example, yeah, at that moment, then it does become more of a speech of, okay, yeah, I have certain capacities that somebody who isn't as mature as me might find themselves to be in possession of. I might be better at certain tasks or certain, I guess, yeah, it's complicated. It's not exactly a task, but rather different situations, different things that I can manage a lot more. And I guess I am trying to aim, as always, the proper aim that I have is not really the more general maturity sense, but rather this idea of emotional maturity. That is where I actually care about the stuff that we are talking about. About everything else, unavoidably, yeah. Funnily enough, we can find in ourselves to be that, yeah, in many cases, throughout the process of growing up and whatnot, we get to slowly become better at tasks and we get to also get a hold of our own body a lot more through the process of integrating our own senses so that we understand how to, so to speak, navigate or direct this machine, biological machine that is our own body. That's only something that happens with enough repetition of the task at hand being, yeah, or that is existing. But in the field of maturity, that has a lot more to deal with the mental processes. I think there is something quite funny. I, I guess, yeah, this is another type of distinction to make here. There is also something very much related to this other aspect of, you know what also happens with maturity that is in relation to the physical type of maturation that only gets to exist in things that grow old enough, so to speak, that is outside of our hand. Because we have this categorical definition of, okay, emotional maturity is something that we can achieve, but that is at the same time a sort of linguistic trap. It's not so much a maturity because we get to be better at doing something just because we have a grown up. No, it's something along the lines of, it's more along the view of, okay, I have become more civilized, more, I have acquired more manners, mannerisms, and understood how to drive myself around situations. That is, in a very broad sense, what is emotional maturity, and that's, once again, we utilize a different sort of allegory to define it, but it's not in itself something that we so much find in just any kind of event or thing which is related to the mere act of, let's say, existing or growing up or whatnot. It's just, I guess, something funny that always happens is we possess way too many tools to move around the concept of, wow, yeah, maybe, perhaps in some ways, when we talk about maturity, we're not talking so much about anything else, but rather just how we can differentiate ourselves from the less grown up versions of things, you know? And in that sense, once again, that's why it is to some degree interesting to denote that the way in which it is utilized, because we try to generate more categories and more modes of differentiation between ourselves so that we can furthermore, the proper word will be still to discriminate between things and to be more capable of categorizing stuff more accordingly. I guess sadly because of the baggage that the world itself to discriminate the stuff means we, I think it's something along the lines of, it's not exactly categorize, it's more along the lines of fully differentiate, I guess, and fully de- with exactitude determine which things pertain to which other realms of notions and whatnot. So, in that sense, it is that we say so much that maturity is also something associated with just certain processes that have to deal more with the different aspects of, I guess, socialization or proper, quote unquote, proper, uh, different methods of teaching and ways of transmitting ideas in at the societal levels and whatnot. So, why am I making this point? Because in itself, maturity is quite a funny thing to talk about, in the sense that, sadly enough, we try to talk a lot about, yeah, you know, we have these types of maturity and we have these other modes of being ourselves and whatnot that are more than anything else truly associated with us having to slowly get better at things. But first and foremost, let me also try to finish that. I just realized I sort of even said it and didn't actually finish it. In the sense of mental maturation, there are two realms or two clear distinctions: the cerebral type of maturation and the mental maturation are not the same things, even if in many other moments we use them as interchangeable terms. In itself, the brain functions very differently once you get to have a fully, quote unquote, fully developed brain or a completely operational brain, let's say, in a different manner, okay? And if we don't have the possibility of doing that, we are not going to be experiencing many other things properly, but that is still in the line of physical maturation. It's nothing else but that. So, why do we care about this? Once again, because this is just to furthermore keep on distinguishing that, yeah, when we try to talk about mental maturity, that is quite a weird category that we have created based on the things that don't make complete sense. The real phenomena of maturation within any living being, or not even living in itself. I'm pretty sure nowadays you can find stuff like, oh yeah, mature rocks that have grown through millennia to be as beautiful as they are, blah blah blah. Okay, so then what pertains to the real, or to the more correct term of maturation? Sorry, maturation is not so much what we find when we try to talk about mental maturity. In that sense, let me try to define it first a little bit more before continuing with the other aspect. Um, when we talk about mental maturity, I sort of already gave a very basic, rapid explanation. There is, in this case, something very funny that happens, and that is okay. What do we have here? It's not so much a completely unrelated aspect of our own existence, but rather these other areas in which we find ourselves dealing with the stuff along the lines of, okay, you know what? I am slowly getting to handle a lot, or not even a lot. I'm slowly getting to handle things better or differently. We might many times refer to them from a more subjective experience as better, but the more general method, or general mode of referring to them is just different. And why do we actually try to care about the differences that we gain in our experiences of the world, and whatnot? Because in our case, what we also have is the reality of, you know what, we found ourselves having this method of explaining what is maturity in a mode in which we make it look like, okay, emotionally, we all grow up being basic childs, and what we get to do is to develop through the most basic process of learning, mirroring our parents and whatnot. We get to slowly become more and more capable of understanding what are emotions in a very basic form. That's the primary mode of emotional maturation that we all gain, and that's already a tricky enough distinction. We could probably, in a certain way, we could probably spend 50 minutes only talking about that, but in a more trying to not lose ourselves so much in the basics. Once we get to understand from our parental figures those functions, then the real process of what we as a society call emotional maturity starts, or emotional maturation begins. That's the same thing. In that sense, there is something very funny. That is, okay, I have to, first and foremost, be capable of creating the symbolic structures to be capable of representing in my own head what the different emotions mean. There is, most of the time when we talk about maturation, that there is a very common explanation that also comes in hand with all of that, or that is utilized to illustrate somebody who is mature, is somebody who can empathize a little bit better. It's sort of correct, but it's also sort of misleading. Unavoidably, somebody like a psychopath, a clinical psychopath, not, oh, a crazy person as a mm, non-category, but rather, okay, a clinically declared psychopath is somebody who doesn't possess the capacity, in many cases, to even have those mirror neurons, you know? So, trying to come back to the point, we have different emotions that we try to illustrate and define as certain checkpoints for maturity. In reality, what I have been observing the most from a personal experience has been okay, what is related to emotionality and what not is more than anything else, first and foremost, the capacity, I say it in a different way, just before, to create a symbolic structure to represent things in different words. If we don't understand what is symbolic stuff, we start to conceptualize everything that we are talking about so that we can later on then connect those initial concepts with the rest of the things that we see in the world. The emotions that we feel, the emotions that we can see somebody else feel, and the emotions that we can understand are part of the human specter of emotions themselves, slowly become more and more integrated within the ways in which we act around the world. A more mature person is somebody who gets to understand not only the basic types of emotions, but also somebody who can, in a very broad sense, understand the context under which those emotions are positive to look forward to, are good to try and entice, are good to try and evade, and also which other possible emotions might arise and which possible reactions are positive enough to bring out from our side once we find those other emotions from the other side. There is the issue once again. We have a definition, societally speaking, in which we talk about emotional maturity of it as if it came from an external thing. That's, sorry, it comes from an external thing. It comes from me being capable of not only having my own emotions and dealing with them, but also when I'm trying to talk with you, being capable of explaining to you what I feel, being capable of giving you what I know, and doing with all of that different actions of different sorts that allow the both of us to be happy in different ways. And that is, once again, not the particular types of definitions that we can find once we look at the normal mode of referring to maduration in any other area of life. At the best, let's say it like this. In many cases, there is, I guess, yeah, there is no other way of avoid of saying it. Okay, there was one reproductive maturation. Only in that one type of maturation, there is another thing besides ourselves involved, and only there it is that we understand also what it actually means to be mature in relation to this other side. But in the emotional aspect, we have a very hard time truly explaining and being capable of referring more than anything else to this emotional maturity because we have a mode of talking about it. First and foremost, we assume that we can talk about it. Actually, it's quite an uncomfortable discussion to have. Oh yeah, can you actually be emotionally mature enough to make somebody else feel better or feel good enough when they are around you? It's quite not a normal thing to have or not a normal thing to talk about. We have unavoidably, as always, there are many uncomfortable discussions to have. It doesn't mean that just because this one is of that sort, wow, unavoidable, or automatically it becomes a bad thing to have. No, it's more along the lines of, okay, actually, what happens is suddenly, in our case, when we are talking about, first and foremost, maturity as a whole thing, as a whole category, it is the process of slowly getting more capable of operating in different realms, in different situations, and in different places. In this case, though, what matters the most is when it comes to the subjective emotional levels of maturity, there is another category that we do not talk about, that we should actually be capable of looking at, that we do not make any mention of, and that is the aspect of, okay, I personally don't sometimes need 5 years to understand the stuff. I can actually adapt myself to knowledge and be capable of utilizing it within the proper contexts as long as I have created a sufficient enough framework of reference to look at the stuff and be capable of referencing it for whenever it is that I need to use it in any other situation. If I haven't created those moments, those gaps, those instances, then it will not work unavoidably, but it isn't tied so much to, oh yeah, I don't know, today I will become my moderation. I can press a button, and 5 years from now, I will have automatically become emotionally mature. No, it's something quite different. And in that differentiation, it is that the whole, so to speak, the whole intriguing or important aspect lies in emotional maturity, mental maturity, conceptual maturity, I guess, if you want to say it too, in terms of the different ideas that we're capable of, intellectual, that's the proper term, I guess, to utilize, intellectual maturity and whatnot. All of those things are associated mostly with the investment of time that we do and with the proper acquisition of knowledge. And knowledge in itself is a different category of things that we so far have slowly tried to define, but in the moment of dealing with it, we still don't have a fully comprehensive category to refer to knowledge. We just say that things are known, that things work in some ways, and we all accept it as such. Knowledge is social conventions in many aspects, and the most certified knowledge is what we can also social through different social conventions agree all of us that seem to be the most appropriate one. But still, why is this important? Because those other, I guess, aspects of maturity that are more related with the consciousness of the human being and not with other truly measurable aspects of our existence, those things, while we don't have the necessity to actually remove them from the category in which we find them nowadays, we still have the capacity to minimally realize, yeah, they don't actually operate in that sense. They are not mental maturity, emotional maturity, symbolic maturity, consciousness, consciential, I think it is called maturity and whatnot. Just because I need to be, I don't know, 50 years old before I get them. No. Those aspects are related to the performance that we had to have and the ways in which we can actually do things meaningful enough in the different areas of our life also, but with the other layer of do all of that properly in correlation to the other person, demonstrating that I can operate correctly is what matters the most in all of that. And so far, I haven't really even said anything. We have spent, I don't know, 30 minutes or so trying to talk about this. I think that I have tried to construct a good enough picture because the idea that I actually have is quite brief with everything else in context. I have already sort of mentioned that, anyways, but yeah, the actions that we need to take in order to achieve this categorical maturity. It isn't true maturity. It is a different type of skill set, I guess. Emotionally capable, very skilled at managing emotions. That would be a more appropriate category. You know, it's not something so much along the lines of, oh wow, yeah. One day I just woke up and I realized that I didn't need to cry my eyes out every single day before I got out of bed. No, it doesn't happen like that. It's more along the lines, okay, one day I sat down, I tried to understand why things worked in my head in the way in which they did, so that I tried to, and probably even were capable of getting these different issues that I was experiencing in my life related to, in this case, yeah, emotions, sensations, dilemmas, anything of that sort. And that doesn't arise if it isn't for the utilization of proper actions in the fields in which we ourselves get to actually become. That's at least my pathway is to become aware, then to finally become conscious, and then to finally fully integrate within our view of the world those things that we're trying to talk about. Therefore, maturity is more along the lines of true comprehension of a thing in terms of what I already defined as consciential or anything that is related to consciousness, maturity, that sort of stuff is more along those lines. And in many cases, luckily enough, the thinking faculty brings to us or offers to us the possibility of not having to waste so much of our existence trying to just let things sort themselves out. As long as we can actually approach concepts properly enough, we will reach conclusions in short periods of time. Because what needs to happen is the knowledge that we are trying to integrate within our view needs to be, I guess we can simplify it to just two sides. Be coherent enough for us and be in accordance with what are or already given pieces of knowledge so that we don't have an internal debate or an incoherency created in our own mental schemes when we are trying to integrate the stuff, and on the other end, it does make any sense so that we are not actually blabbering out the stuff that we don't understand, you know? Therefore, knowledge is very easy to acquire if it fits those two criterias. And in that same sense, anything that is associated to those aspects of consciousness are far easier to deal with as long as we're actually engaged in the action of doing so. The problem in this case is also, sadly enough, anything that is related to those types of maturity, emotional, mental, psychological, any whichever category you want, you like the most, you wish to use the most, blah 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 blah. All of those are characterized by one thing: they require a lot of struggle. It requires a lot of effort to actually be capable of integrating stuff from all of those aspects in our life properly. And if we do not get to integrate anything because or frictions once we are trying to deal with all of those other categories and whatnot arise, it will look like they might be actually a lot harder to achieve. But once again, my thesis, my promise is, you know what, it's not actually so impossible of to obtain any kind of result of that sort. It's far easier once we realize and once we understand, once we assume that it's just a different type of concept that we have to struggle with fight enough against or fight enough in itself with so that we can then integrate it into anything else. It's not so much of a, I guess, the definition that I like to use is just, or not definition, the words are complicated mess that needs so much untangling. In many cases, what sadly happens is, or let me say it like this is, it sounds easy. Uh, it's actually quite simple. Emotional maturation in itself, for example, is associated with many aspects of a, an objective or a particular categorical type of maturity that we defined already as good. Not here, but societally, we have already said these things are or belong to somebody who is emotionally mature. And those things are not in accordance many times with what we can learn throughout the worldly experiences that we get to have. So, in a certain way, sadly, when it comes to all of these areas, what happens, what appears, and what becomes quite apparent is we want to maturate, we want to be capable of dealing with the stuff, we want to become better at confronting, at discussing things and at whatnot. Then something has to also happen in unison with all of that. And that is, I need to actually realize that what I used to have before in my head was not so much of a nice thing, or was not so much of an actually fully functional thing. It might have still served me in the situations in which I found myself to be before, but in themselves, they weren't all that effective at modifying anything else, you know? And yeah, I think that's why I wanted to talk about that. In itself, the concept that we have given to maturity is quite weird. We don't talk about it enough to realize that, yeah, it's categorically speaking, it's not a proper term. Emotional management and whatnot is not so much associated with, oh, well, yeah, you have 15 years old, you cannot manage your emotions. There are some biological aspects to that, but mm, I don't know, 70% of that is associated with how you actually understand things and not actually the age that you have. Unavoidably, there are certain areas of life in which, I don't know, you are 99 years old. It's far more understandable that you get more emotionally swayed into different, very particular emotions. Same as if you were, I don't know, 5 years old. Slowly, that is something that also traces back to the creation of different constructs that refer to how we understand things. Once again, it's tricky to talk about maturity in those aspects of life because we have made quite a bad work at explaining them before. So now, to try and to some degree propose, discuss, argue that yeah, these things actually are not so damaging, is also quite difficult in itself, you know? But it's fine, I guess. It's not so bad. The reality, as always, is it's more than anything else an initial promise. And after that, everything else comes, and that's in itself far better than to not have any capacity of dealing with those ideas and whatnot. I, I don't I don't enjoy so much when the mode of trying to discuss and trying to look at anything that has to do with your maturity makes it look like such a and completely impossible to handle notion. Because, once again, what I was trying to explain, we have methods of referring to things in which it is true that maturity is associated with things completely outside of our control, but what is associated to anything along the lines of the mental processes is not so much of that same category. That's why it's risky to find ourselves utilizing that so easily, so regularly, so freely. It's those tiny concessions that we make in reality that end up affecting the ways in which we act, even. Once a day, sorry, once we get accustomed to minimizing what the things that we do, the things that we experience are, it can very easily happen that we find ourselves saying one day then that, yeah, wow, you know what? I I I never got to emotionally maturate like everyone else. It's not so much along those lines. It's a, in a different tangent, in a different line of thinking, in a different process that all of that happens. It's a different, and that's why I was trying to say it is a skill. It is not exactly something that just appears in accordance with, oh wow, yeah, you have become 25 years old. Now you have become a master of your emotions. You have moderated all of your other biological processes have moderated. Now also has done so your emotional capacity and your emotional management skills also. No, it's far more complicated in that sense of you know what? If and once we get to slowly deal more accurately, more appropriately with the things that we experience, which it only happens once we are willing to do so. If that happens, then we can find maturation of any sort in those aspects. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. That's the issue. As to why, in many cases, the easily given example is oh wow, you can see somebody who is 50, 60, 70, 80 years old and is emotionally immature. Because surprisingly, age doesn't matter in that sense. And I don't know, yeah. One final counter argument, I guess, that still also needs to be stated, just in case I didn't make it clear enough. Yeah, there are some biological, sorry, aspects that are in correlation with maturity. As far as I remember, it is something along the lines of in the brain itself. There are many areas that need to keep on developing themselves even after we have already come out of the womb. That whole idea of a child is a very indefense creature, that which is a very rare anomaly in the animal world, because the human child, the human brethren, I think it is the category, is quite incapable of defending themselves against the rest of the threats. Yeah, in that, I wouldn't say exactly in that same line, maturity comes to play a role. What does happen is there are some areas, particularly, that are associated with the maturity that has to deal with anything along the lines of concepts. Those parts of our brain that allow ourselves to operate with ideas need more development and need some more time to, let's say, cook, to finish preparing themselves so that we can fully utilize them later on. It's quite impossible for a 2 year old, 3 year old, even if they are capable of producing a speech, utilizing a speech, to understand the nuance of any emotion. But I am being incredibly, to some degree, yeah. This is assuming way too many things, but if you can sit down and try to teach an 8-year old concepts about emotions, they will be capable of understanding them. The problem is you need to be capable of talking about them slowly, coherently enough so that they understand. Otherwise, it won't happen. And otherwise, yeah, it will still require more time to cook in the brain of the children or something along those lines. But in reality, no. It's all of those aspects are not so much associated with something mystical or something that nobody controls. Sadly, it has been a misconstrued concept how we refer to those parts of our existence. It's not so much about me having become emotionally mature because I just kept existing. It's more, I guess, I don't even know. I am assuming that the expression financially mature doesn't exist. I would assume so. It's the same as saying something along those lines. In that same case, it's it's quite a weird concept that we have created just to make ourselves. Yeah, that's the analysis that I personally make. I assume it was created in order to allow ourselves to not feel so bad. Once we realize that one day we never grew to have the capacity to manage our own emotions in any way, to manage the things which we feel, the sensations that we encounter in the world, all of those different aspects of reality which are part of the human condition and whatnot, out of those things which we never understood how to drive around and such, that are not exactly once again associated directly with anything along the lines of just a naturally given process, but which actually require conscious intentional effort, feel better once we the I wouldn't say denaturalize them. I would rather say, I guess, dissociate them into something more akin to, oh yeah, one day we might wake up and have finally gotten to be more mature. It's not so much like that. In this case, no. But yeah, I guess that's the first explanation. I don't know. I wasn't really expecting to take so fucking long on that. Sorry. Um, it took me an hour. I guess now I understand why some teachers say so little in an hour. Because you need to go through a lot of stuff to finally reach the conclusion. Um, I understand it now. I finally get it myself. But yeah, it's understandable. Not everything is so easy to talk out. Anyways, next thing. It was very good. Next, what do we have next? What is even the next stuff? Experience. Experience. That's the next topic. That's I don't know. I don't think it's all that different. That's why when I started, I said, yeah, all of these things are somewhat related. They are not all that distant. They are not all that completely dissociated from one another. All of this stuff only happens. I said the common thread of today is all of this stuff happens only through X in itself our own. The word is not just experience, it's along the lines of, yeah, our own capacity to go through those situations also. That's what all of that has in common. Only through In this case, let me trace back a little bit. Um, what is even experience? What am I even trying to refer to? I guess this is a little bit wider, a little bit more in the air, so to speak, something more detached from most of the other things. Not because it isn't at all related with anything else, but rather because it is this weird category of, oh, yeah, you know what? You need to. Let me give an actual example. You need to possess enough years of experience until you can discuss stuff and whatnot, or only certain types of experiences allow you to have an stance and be capable of expressing yourself in accordance to different type of things. Experience as a whole category is quite a weird thing. First and foremost, we have this thing, definition, basic definition, standing on the same ground. Definition is experience is the knowledge of any, I would say, actual, practical, even theoretical thing, so that we can try to be capable of discussing our experiences with those of the race of others, with everyone else, so that we can reach better, wider, more acceptable, more reasonable conclusions. Why do they matter? Why are we trying to focus on them now? They are quite tricky. That's why I want to also talk about them. They are quite difficult to properly picture in many instances because there is something very funny in the laboral world, let's say. There is a type of experience that gets defined as, okay, you need a certain amount of years, for example, to qualify for certain jobs. And in many cases, what's a funny realization for anybody who has tried to get a job is, in many cases, it doesn't even really matter how much you actually have been working at places. You can find even out there people who has already even retired. Experience itself is a weird category that we have constructed. It tries to serve the purpose of explaining things in a way in which, let's say like this, the experience that we have about this stuff serves to avoid the discussion and the whole part of validating our knowledge with others. Experience is the, I also want to say signal, a word, I guess, we carry with ourselves around life so that we can say that we know about the stuff, that we have been in certain places and what's not. Okay, the issue is experience in itself is also not so much of an important thing. And even so, something funny. It's quite a complicated discussion, man. Why? Let's just. Let me say it anyways. Something funny that also comes in accordance or in line with all of that is once we are dealing with experiences, also with I talked about to give an example, those laboral experiences, those things that we try to utilize to validate others and whatnot. Okay, that happens, but besides that, another thing that happens is also, funnily enough, that we have certain another category of experiences that are the personal experiences, and that is an incredibly risky terrain. There are ways in which nowadays we have intertwined the both of them to talk about either personal, laboral, in unavoidably personal during work experiences and whatnot, which makes them become even more difficult to properly be capable of discussing them in actuality. Why? To begin with anything, something very interesting is when we are talking about the personal experiences that anybody gets to have about anything, unavoidably that is more than anything else based just on our subjective experience of the world. It's basic common ground. We are not talking about objective stuff once we are talking about my experiences in childhood, your experiences in childhood. That's not in any sort of way going to be an objective thing. Experiences serve in many ways. That's, I guess, that's the more basic level explanation. Experiences are a very useful way to connect with other people. Why? Because through the experiences and through the repeating shared experiences, we get to realize that we share more with others than what we were capable of realizing at a first glance. Therefore, in this case, something that also happens is, yeah, you know what? It's quite useful for us to be capable of trying to discuss any kind of experience. I am still, I am still avoiding them. Let me actually at least pronounce them so that we don't act like they don't fucking exist. Whenever there is a particular type of category within any personal experience that counts as negative experience, at most of them being any kind of traumatic experience, all of those are even more complicated to talk about. And all of those, once again, we're talking about maturity, we're talking about emotionality. All of those things take a fucking lot of time to deal with. Those in themselves are way too complicated to talk about right now. So, leaving those aside, not focusing particularly on them, on the general level of personal experiences and this other type of category that we have constructed to refer or to, let's say like this, just as money in some way equals time that we are saving ourselves and time that we are interchanging with other humans in order to obtain other things, that same thing happens with experience. Experience equals validation, equals credibility. The more experience we are in certain areas, the more capable of demonstrating experience, of showcasing that we have that, the more capable we are of also sounding as convincing as we might want to be. Issue is, unavoidably, in the modern world, it's quite a realistic discovery that many people have the capacity to fake their experiences. And also, along the lines of what is personal, there is something very funny. We have enough, at this point in time, we have enough already recorded stuff so that we can talk about a new type of category within what is personal. And that is the directly lived, or it's not vicariously the category. An easy way of discussing it is, once again, saying just vicariously, but it is through the means of others' experiences. We can experience stuff even if we ourselves are not experiencing it. I remember that the easiest way to think about it is in this modern world. What do we have? We can experience literally entire stories through movies, and we can get to somewhat experience the emotions that people felt during different situations just because we have become capable of enough of utilizing things like the cinematographic language to showcase all of that. And that is doing so through the eyes of someone else, doing so through a construct that only portrays one very particular aspect of that. It isn't the entirety of it in any way. Same thing as, I don't know, something like a let's play. or a gameplay of any sort. We are not actually ourselves who are playing. We get to experience a game. We get to experience the opinion of somebody, even who is playing the game, if we look for that. But it is still not us who are doing those things. And in all of those realms, something very funny happens, and that is in the present world, the value of experiences is slowly becoming weaker. There is something funny that happens in more than anything else. We have it in this latest, I guess. What's the generations? In our latest generations, we have this whole thing of, you're actually asking me for so much experience in works when I don't have enough time to have all of that experience to get to work for you. It's physically impossible for me to actually gain a job. There is a resignification that is happening in a more global level, in a more societal level, I guess, in which we're slowly also realizing, well, in some way, an experience is not just an experience. It's just the same as, I don't know, a dollar isn't just a dollar. There is another meaning behind them. And the point, in this case, I'm just trying to say, yeah, sadly, in many cases, we don't talk about all of that stuff. We don't say, oh yeah, you know what, you can gain experience far better if you actually do so. If you actually look for them, even if una already, just as I said before, you try to gain experience through others about certain situations, certain things, certain moments, certain events, certain whatever, you can still obtain experience about the stuff in different methods and obtain, I wouldn't say exactly the same validity, that is a different aspect. The degrees of validity that the different types of experiences possess is a more complicated discussion in terms of, well, we actually don't value the same thing or the same type of thing being experienced, if it is being directly experienced or if it is being experienced by somebody who is just, let's say, consuming the experience through someone else. So that's not something that we have fully developed yet. I would say it's quite complicated to be capable of talking about that in particular, but in itself, going back to the point, sorry, yeah, the experiences that we get to have, the things that we get to go through, and such, they do possess a value. I'm not saying that things don't possess any value at all in that sense, but what I am saying also is, funnily enough, this older conception of, okay, our experiences are everything for us has slowly become more and more unreliable. Luckily enough, I guess that isn't even recent, but there is this funny. There was this one guy, maybe you heard about him. His name was Descartes, uh, René Descartes. That guy proposed that, yeah, the human experience is quite unreliable. And after that came, was it? I think it wasn't Thomas Kuhn. It isn't Thomas. It's Kant. Immanuel Kant, who also said, oh, wow, yeah, the human realizations aren't as useful just because we don't get to experience as much from our own perspective. So, uh, it's quite an interesting dive, I guess, if you go into those authors, thinkers, into their books. But the point is that, yeah, experience is in itself something that we value, we have slowly started to value less and even more. Also, the other point that I was trying to go for, I sort of mentioned that, but not as clearly. There is something funny that happens, and that is we have mythified how experiences function In many cases, it is just understanding enough the different methods or modes of referring to the things that happened so that we can convincingly enough discuss them with others. There is this is an incredibly complicated idea in terms of it's I wouldn't say it's risky by itself, but it's something along those lines, I guess, yeah. There is no real distinction between somebody who has through others experienced enough negative experiences of sorts and somebody who has by first hand done so in terms of if you put both of them to discuss, what matters is not exactly how much of a primacy of the sensations there is, but rather how much of a convincing narration can be created about any given experience. Experiences, in that sense, what I said before, are quite unreliable, and how we narrate them is also quite difficult to properly grasp. We make it look like experiences are all that valuable, but slowly we are progressing more and more towards a world in which anything that is associated with experiences is not so much of a valuable thing. Why? Because all of those are quite easy to fake. This world offers way too much knowledge, and something funny that happens is I can argue to you that I possess certain experiences, that I have gone through certain experiences, and as long as I am capable of creating a convincing enough speech about it, you might as well just believe me. Why? Because unless you possess my personal life record, you have no way of knowing if what I am telling you is true or false. So yeah, it's it's quite complicated. That's why I was saying it's quite a risky idea. Once you realize that, you also realize, okay, I can actually also gain experience for things and make it look like I know stuff just because I realized now that I possess the capacity to, by simply what I expressed before, by simply seeing stuff through others of these certain experiences, I can somehow slowly acquire enough experience myself of the thing which I am observing in a second hand manner. It's I don't know, it's a risky, but I guess that's the conclusion. I would rather not continue down that alley. It's way too much of a complicated aspect. Uh, but yeah, the point is, in terms of subjective levels, the experiences that we have mean something. It's not that nothing has a value, but rather it is that also socially we are moving towards the removal of all that high value that we have established on them before. And we already, I guess, know, or we say that we know, that they don't matter as much. We are moving towards a different sort of measurement. I think it is along the lines of effectiveness, proficiency, actual capacities, instead of just knowledge. Something very funny that happens is I remember having heard, I don't know, some time ago, I don't really know how long ago, this thing of nowadays when you're looking for jobs, sad, sadly, or not when you're looking for jobs, when you're looking for employees in your firm, it isn't the word, in your company, you aren't really looking for the oldest person. You are looking for the most capable one. Sadly, experience stops being such a reliable indicator of things. Nowadays, you can have somebody who has been a programmer for just 5 years that can be as good or even better than somebody that has been a programmer for 30 years, 20 years. So it's quite complicated to fully appreciate what it means. I guess we had an older method of valuing anything that was associated with all of these experiences of any sort. But in itself, nowadays, we are slowly progressing towards a different conception. Racer, it seems to be something more along the lines of proficiency, efficiency, capacities, actual performance, And I guess it's just around the idea of, are we ourselves obtaining any kind of experience out of things that we actually care about? I guess those would be, to finish it properly. The final questions are we actually obtaining experience out the things that we say we want to be good at? Are we actually consuming things that allow ourselves to become more capable of doing anything in those parts that we have already defined as what we want to continue experiencing through the rest of our life or not? It is only through those processes that we become better. It is sadly not through just me doing, I don't know, wielding for the next 20 years without ever trying to understand if the abilities that I possess right now are the best that I can be. Nowadays, sadly, it's more and more a requirement for the utmost capacities, not so much just having experience. But yeah, I don't know. Anyways, that's my point. Thank you. Let me drink some water. I don't know. I also have been here for like way too long. I should actually sit up, I guess. But yeah, I guess that's, as I said, that's for experiences. Thank you. Um, you know what? Probably yeah. Let me take like a, I don't know, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, something break. A tiny minimal break, minimal enough so that I can, I guess, get the blood flowing. Let me set up. Let me. What happened? Wow, I chose the wrong scene. That's what happened. Anyways, there were. But I was trying to say, yeah, I was. I always. I realized I have this issue of. I start to get somehow lightheaded when I am sitting here for an hour and a half just speaking. I don't even know why. But yeah, the other day, not the other day, literally yesterday, I I I got up, I stretched, I had like a moment of silence. And yeah, something very funny was to see that yeah, actually I am not dying. It's just I think it has something to do with probably just too much time. Not actually sitting, but along the lines of, not winding down and such. That's most probably the reason. But anyways, even like, I don't know, 2 minutes, something along those lines. And after that, we are going to be back for the last topic, I guess. We had like one, so yeah, we should probably try to wrap up. Not actually wrap up, but at least try to talk about it. I don't even remember what I wrote down. Can I actually see so that I can understand what was it? Ah, yeah, out intensity. Ah, okay. I remember. Sorry. Anyways, give me a minute and a half. Thank you. Wow, what's what's up? Anyways, here we are. Ah, wait. Okay, there it is. Sorry. Uh, the point is, we have just one more thing to talk about. After that, we're actually on for today. So that's why is it so? Why is the microphone not working? Anyways, uh, don't worry. Can I can't I want, yeah, I like that, this. I have a bad habit. Before actually I begin with the topic, I have a bad habit that is me whispering. And this mic, for some reason, doesn't allow me to whisper. I cannot do that. So, we are so back. I cannot just sit down and talk like around here because for some reason it doesn't capture it. So, anyways, I was trying to say the point is, what's up? Intensity. We are on the last one. This this is quite a more complex one. I have already explained it. Common thread is things that we go through, things that are associated with. Oh wow, yeah. We get to understand them only once we find ourselves there. I don't know. Let me actually say it in a way in which it makes any sense. I have this I have found this idea repeated through many instances. I remember, I don't know if it is actually a popular line. I say it as if it was that to live life to its utmost intensity, to let it be all that it can be, then rejoice in knowing that it got to its almost fervor. Uh, Something along those lines is an idea that seems to be of primacy in the life of most, I wouldn't even say most of any one particular place. For some reason, we live in a world in which the norm has become for us to be fixated on, oh yeah, things are intense enough, I get enough happiness and enough satisfaction and enough of everything. Everything is intense enough so that I can be satisfied enough with all of them. And I don't know, I am I am personally struggling quite a lot to understand it. Not that it doesn't make any sense from where it comes from. It's understandable that. But actually, what is weird is to see how little efforts we are putting ourselves to discuss, I guess, to finally reach a realization of, wow, you know what also happens? Sadly, we're talking here as if intensities of any sort and all of that stuff was in any way useful, when in reality, ourselves, what we experience, is sometimes not everything needs to be of its utmost intensity to feel good. For example, I remember something. I finally, I have an example. I have an actual example of something that I remember thinking about, and I said, wow, is this it? I don't know. I guess theory time. I remember having heard about something very funny that is one of the reasons as to why it seems to be so interesting, or it seems to be at least a wonderful enough experience for anyone to, to go through, is this thing called, wait, what's the translation in English? It's youngster, childish love, something along those lines, basically, in which we get to experience that more basic level of love with someone else. This idea of um, the more primal mode. Suenal, yeah. Yeah, suenal, sorry. Suenal. love, passionate love of that sort, that comes from us going through the experiences themselves when we are young enough. Why, in some cases, it's just a tradition that happens of, oh yeah, yeah, they are young, let them be. Okay, it also has another side of the explanation. That is, you won't ever in your whole life be as happy. You won't ever feel that sensation of love in any other time of your existence as that one. And that is just related to how the brain functions. The whole aspects that are related to the dopamine, to the serotonin that you release when you see the person that makes you feel stuff and whatnot, are not as fully covered in all of those substances that make it be more mature. In many cases, we chase these sensations, these intense sensations, in weird ways, and they are not actually beneficial to us. There is a fixation on intensity for the sake of just being intense. Why? Because there is also another funny concept. In many cases, all of this comes from what I was saying before. This was being stated by somebody. It's not something that I made up. It's something that somebody who knows about uh, brain science said. I am just paraphrasing it. Also, sadly, no matter how much you find that person to love in your younger years, you're unavoidably going to have a fallout because the rate at which those relationships fail is much higher than at any other time later on in life. Because why? Unavoidably, intensity isn't all that useful. It's just sensations for the sake of sensations and then for the sake of experiencing stuff. It's a That's what I'm trying to offer. It's a complicated conception that we possess that we utilize to talk about things in general. We like to, I wouldn't say it's an adulation for intensity in its utmost capacity, but it is certainly a weird mode of referring to the necessity to have stuff be as intense as it can be. For example, a different aspect, but still useful. The way in which drugs have slowly been changing throughout time, and the way in which the different substances that we produce, we consume either recreationally or even for the sake of different treatments of sorts. We have more and more intense stuff for the sake of being intense. It's all of that is quite, I will accept, strange. I don't understand to some degree why we have such a primacy for intensity in all of those ways, in all of the, yeah, in all of those aspects. It's not so much an actually necessary thing, it's a rather socially accepted as necessary thing that therefore do not fall out of the line. Everybody can agree that is useful, everybody can accept that is necessary, everybody can once again parrot just like the rest that is normal. Is it in itself normal? No. So something very funny that happens also, it's what we see nowadays when we go out. Also, sorry, before I actually keep on fucking going, uh, welcome to, I hope you're having a nice day. Good evening. Sorry for not saying anything. Now continuing. What I was trying to say is what we find, what the reality itself demonstrates is also intensity isn't even that meaningful in any way. It doesn't matter. It doesn't lead to anything else. It doesn't allow stuff in any way or manner because what happens in the way of all of that is sadly what 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 can we see once we go out there? The persons who live the most intense life end up burned out. you dedicate yourself too much to something, to the different pleasures that life offers, to the different things that you gain, to different even negative emotions like rage and such lead to nothing good. It is a weird cult to intensity. I remember having heard an explanation. This isn't exactly my conclusion, but I remember something along the lines of what happens in many cases with the desire to actually chase intensity and high enough sensations is a mode in which we associate our existence with an immature conception of the world. It is better to have something incredibly intense as long as it is good enough, even if it is just once, because we cannot fully grasp that there are more times to come after that. So we would rather have an utterly intense experience of any sort, be it either very dopaministic, very, let's say, very happiness inducing, very in itself just emotionally intense in the ways in which, wow, you know what, I saw one of those movies that made me bawl my eyes out and such. All of those things which are intense, we prefer to have those because it is quite complex for the human being itself to be capable of reconciling the reality that yeah, I need to live tomorrow. There is, I we have this expression here, eat like there is no tomorrow. It also is associated to some degree with that. The, the incapacity to realize that, yeah, I don't actually need to kill myself consuming in any kind of food. I can just do so until I find my feeling, until I realize that I have had enough and that I don't actually require to consume so much, until there is a part of the brain that itself, yeah, feels some happiness from chewing, from consuming. Even more unavoidable if things taste good, but there is a different aspect, that which is associated with what I was talking about before, the maturation of the senses, the maturation of the consciousness and such, that is sometimes it doesn't really matter why I do certain things in terms of, oh wow, yeah, this makes me feel good. I don't know. All of us have different access to those conceptually lesser buttons, but there is also a reason as to why we don't spend our whole existence just chasing them and just going after that. One of the many promises that the, let's say like this, consciousness has brought forward is the reality that, yeah, or is the, I guess, optimistical estimation of a future in which it won't be as necessary for us to just utterly waste ourselves chasing so much things that don't last. There are ways in which we can slowly develop everything else so that it becomes better forever. It's not something that just feels good right now. But once again, it's something hard to properly pinpoint that because in some aspects we are talking about the intensity of sensations, the intensity of feelings, the intensity of things. I remember these explanations of because it also is associated to, you know what, I cannot really feel good myself because I have all of these other things that I need to satisfy and that I need to find a feeling in, which are not in themselves the thing which I want the most, but at least if I get those, I can numb whichever is it that I cannot actually get. And in its utmost representation, sadly, it can even be, and you know what? I might never get any of the other things that take so much effort because the world that teaches me that everything needs to be instantaneous, very brief, rapid, intense. This necessity for acceleration, so to speak, and rapidness and what not, nothing can be so long. It's unnatural for us to spend so much time on things. Even in video games, there are these current patterns of, oh yeah, you know what, we have to always be moving, always have action, always blah 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 blah. All of those things slowly train us, even if you want to say unconsciously, so that we just slowly slip further and further onto that mentality of, yeah, you know what, it's it will be better for me to just have something utterly intense than to have something mildly good. It's, I don't know. I think it's at the same time, it seems like a big concern, but reality is already giving enough examples of it's literally frying brains to do that. You you fry your brain in different ways. There are so many new modes of burnout that have been discovered because people are just chasing those intense things, and we are only finding more and more of those cases in the different fields. That's just a recurring theme in everywhere. And slowly we're getting to resolve that. But on a subjective level, yeah, it is still just another reminder to, yeah, you know what? It's not always the fruit with the most tasteful nectar, the one that matters, but rather the one that just gives us enough to keep on living. That's the one that actually has a weight in our existence and such. But I don't know, man. I think that's my point. That yeah, I don't know. We have way too intense sensations sometimes, and we like to make them look like it's the most practical thing. I don't know. It's a weird way of referring to stuff. How we talk about our ideas, how we talk about our wishes, and everything slowly becomes ever increasingly more and more intense. It's it's strange, I guess. We are, I said it before, we are slowly transitioning into a world in which they are disappearing, but at the same time, we are just transforming them onto other things. Now, at least we can have intense dreams and ideals. It's, for example, something that even I say in some way is, you know what? The old times, this previous generation from us has lost all faith in the world. They cannot dream as much. It is time to have intense, completely complex, utterly wonderful dreams and visions and hopes about a future possible world in which things get to be better. That is in itself still utterly intense. I think it's just we go through the different stages of demonizing that which we don't like that much, or which we have realized is not all that useful in our existences, just to glorify other things that in the end, or in hindsight, ended up being as, or even if not exactly equally damaging, a little bit more, a little bit less, still damaging, man. And I don't know. I think it's just that's still part of human nature, but it's it's also funny to see, I guess. But yeah, that's the conclusion. Not to have so much intensity in stuff, I guess. It's also nice to slowly go through stuff sometimes. A more, I guess they live in juxtapositions. something nuanced cannot be something utterly intense. So yeah, it's better to have nuanced stuff than to have the most intense creations, I will say. But yeah, that's it, I guess. I don't know. I don't have anything else to say actually. So yeah, that's that's it for today, I guess. I guess so, yeah. Tomorrow tomorrow is Karata supposedly. I looked at the schedule earlier, and yeah, luckily enough, this is one of those weeks in which there are two Karata readings, so tomorrow is luckily enough, yeah, time for that. But anyways, when tomorrow comes, we're going to worry ourselves with that. Today is finished, so today was already a good day. I don't know. That whole Buddhist practice of, you know what, you go on your bed and you count the nice things that happen. That act of remembering the happy events, being aware, gaining the capacity to realize that life isn't as horrible as we are used to think that it is. Sometimes, even if it is bad, it isn't as utterly negative. That same, in accordance with the intensity of of negative emotions and sensations, there is, I guess, final annotation in accordance with all of that. There is a reason as to why we are more prone to negative emotions than to good emotions. Negativity activates far more parts of the brain than positive stuff. Dopamine in itself feels good, but it becomes harder to obtain. That's also why we can very rapidly spiral into utterly addict of stuff or just lose interest into what cannot keep our dopamine levels stable or constantly high, so to speak. So, in that other line, yeah, sadly, negativity has a primacy in the brains of humans in general. But yeah, that will be so sorry. As I was saying, that's it was a good day. And yeah, we talk out a lot, so I'm happy with that myself. Until next time, I guess. Tomorrow, the day past tomorrow, in a week, in 2 weeks, in 5 years, whenever it is. It was a nice day. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for everything. Have a nice one. And yeah, I don't know, hydration, uh, rest, all of that other stuff, responsibilities. We all already know them. We all already know that we have to do them. So yeah, good luck. Thank you. Have a nice one. And yeah, bye bye. Ciao.